Okay, welcome to this presentation on computer hardware. My name is Brad Nicolaisen, and I'll be talking to you about the basic components that make up your computer. Okay, today we'll be talking about your motherboard. We'll talk about the central processing unit, also known as the CPU, and also known as a processor. We'll talk about random access memory, which is also known as RAM. We'll talk about your hard drive, both internal hard drives and external. We'll talk about DVD drives, power supply, expansion cards, as well as the various input and output devices that you can attach to your computer. All right, let's start off with the main component. All right, that's your motherboard. Right. Everything, all the hardware, all the devices actually connect to your motherboard. And as we're going through the presentation, I'll talk you through what kind of slot they connect to, how they connect to the motherboard. The motherboard contains all kinds of integrated circuits, which is beyond this lecture, but just know that again, it is basically the heart of your computer. All right, the second component we're going to talk about is your central processing unit. Okay. Again, when I talked to you earlier, I said it's also called your CPU. You'll also hear talked about as a processor. And this is where most of the computer calculations take place. The CPU connects to a socket on the motherboard, and the simplest measure of a CPU is gigahertz in cores. And remember, when you're purchasing a CPU or a computer with a CPU in it, whether it's a laptop or whether it's a desktop computer, the more gigahertz the better, and the more cores the better. Commonly right now you'll see CPUs with 2 cores, 4 cores, and some even are coming out with 8 cores. So again, the more cores the better, but like everything else, the more you get, the more it's going to cost. So you have to kind of find out how much power you actually need compared to your budget. The two most popular CPUs right now are AMD and Intel. So those will be decisions you have to make. And if you're ever building your own computer, you have to make sure that your motherboard supports the type of processor you're going to get. So your motherboard will specifically say whether it uses an AMD or an Intel CPU. Right. One thing about CPUs is when they're doing their calculations, they get very hot. So CPUs are cooled several ways. They can have a heat sink on them. They can have a heat sink and a fan combination. Some of them can just have fans on them. And there's other cooling devices that are used, such as liquid cooling. And the picture in this graphic is a liquid cooled desktop computer. Also, to help cool your computer, there's several fans that's in a computer case, and they actually draw air in from the environment, run it over the hot parts in your computer, then discharge that air, and that helps keep the computer cool. The next part we're going to talk about is random access memory, and you'll most commonly hear this referred to as RAM. This is what's called temporary storage on your computer. And by temporary, what it means is you'll actually lose what's in RAM when the computer is shut down. And another term you'll see for that is volatile. So if you see the word volatile storage or volatile RAM, think it's just temporary. It means while the computer's on, it's going to be working, it'll be storing data, it'll be making calculations for you and helping you out with those kind of things. But when you shut it off, all that information is lost. Okay. RAM connects to slots on a motherboard. Typically, you'll have 2 or 4 slots on a motherboard that RAM will be connected to. RAM is measured in gigabytes, and again, more is better. But again, more is usually more expensive. Right now, currently, about 4 gigabytes to 8 gigabytes is the standard that most computers have. If you're gaming, some people might get to 16 gigabytes, and there's boards that will even support, your motherboards, that'll even support more than that. And that's one of the terminologies when you hear people talk about motherboards, they'll just say boards. Okay, what does RAM kind of do for you? Basically, when you open up a program or multiple programs, those programs are loaded into RAM. And the reason they're loaded into RAM is that you can access those programs much faster in RAM than you can from your hard drive. So if your computer starts to get sluggish or starts to slow down, it could be you have too many programs opening, and it might be time to upgrade your RAM. So that's one of the biggest things that can kind of prolong the life of your computer is putting more RAM in it. And if you want to see how much RAM you actually have on your computer, you can go to a site called crucial.com, and you download a little program, it installs on your computer in less than a minute, and it'll actually tell how much RAM RAM your computer currently has, as well as what type of RAM it is, and then it'll also tell you the maximum amount of RAM your motherboard allows, and it also shows you what you can buy at Crucial to fill those needs that you have. So say for instance you currently have 2 gigabytes of RAM. You could run this program, it'll tell you that you have 2, and it'll say you can take as much as 8. So if your computer is going slow, you could upgrade your computer from 2 gigabytes of RAM to 4, or even go to the maximum amount and upgrade it to 8, which will make your computer run much faster. Because there's more programs that can load in 8 gigabytes of RAM, thus they can activate faster. All right, your hard drive. The main thing about your hard drive is you need to know that it's the main storage area on your computer. And this is non-volatile storage. So when you shut your computer off, or even if you remove your hard drive from your laptop or your desktop, all that data stays on there. Unlike RAM, when you shut the computer off, everything's lost in RAM. Okay. Hard drives connect to a slot on your motherboard. The most common type now is what's called SATA, but there's several other types as well. There's EIDE, there's SCSI drives. But when you buy a computer nowadays, you're going to end up using a SATA connection more than likely. Hard drives are measured in gigabytes and even terabytes now. And a terabyte is 1,000 gigabytes. So you've got a lot of room for storage now, which is good because nowadays you usually take a lot of pictures, you have music on your computer, you'll have videos, you'll have a lot of different programs, so it's great to have that much storage. So also, any of the files that you save, if you save a Word document, if you save a couple pictures, if you save some music, some videos, any kind of programs you have, basically any file that you have is saved to the hard drive. And that's one thing later we'll talk about is in another video is file management, to make sure you know where all that stuff is saved at. Right. Hard drives can be internal and external. In laptops and desktops you have an internal hard drive, but you also, if you want more storage, you actually can buy an external hard drive. So usually these are connected through a USB connector. And your USB connectors are on the outside of your desktop computer or on the outside of your laptop computers. So, and these USB connectors connect to what, probably? You guessed it, the motherboard. Okay, so everything goes back to the motherboard. So you can use these external hard drives if you want to store more data. And the advantage of an external hard drive is if you're doing some work on one computer at home, you can take the external hard drive out, take that work with you, and take it somewhere to another computer, hook it up, and still be able to work on it. So external hard drives are fantastic for making your work portable, as well as for backing up all your data. New type of drive, it's been around for a while, but it's just starting to come down in price, is what's called a solid state hard drive. Solid state hard drives are more expensive, but they're a lot faster because they don't actually have any moving components. So if you need a computer, you need to be able to access stuff really fast, look into a solid state hard drive. Again, they're more expensive than the traditional, basically IED drives, IDE drives, and that use platters. Like a DVD drive, this is pretty basic. You can use it to install programs, you can play movies on it, you can play games, and you can write data to a DVD. Writing data to a DVD is not as popular as it was one time because you do have external hard drives now that can hold a lot more data. A Blu-ray DVD disc will hold about 18 gigabytes, where you can buy external hard drives that'll hold a terabyte, which is 1,000 gigabytes. Plus, it's just a lot easier to use an external hard drive than it is to burn something to a DVD drive. Other terms you'll hear for this is called optical drive or disk drive. So those are all interchangeable. And that's one of the things about when you start learning about computers, you have to start learning the acronyms and how different things have different names. Like we talked about, for instance, central processing unit is called a CPU, RAM is random access memory. So getting used to the terminology is part of learning about the hardware of a computer. All right, your power supply. This is pretty basic. Power supply is the power source for your computer. So your computer cannot run without a power supply. When you look at a power supply, and you can see the image we have here, you'll notice there's several cables. That's because when the power supply is on there, and this is for a desktop computer, they have to plug into the motherboard. So the motherboard gets all its power from the power supply. It has to plug into the motherboard at a spot usually near the processor, and that area powers the processor. You'll have a separate cable that'll plug into the hard drive, and these used to be called Molex connectors. Now they're SATA connectors for power. Your DVD drive also needs a connector for power, and there's other hardware that you can use that you can power up as well, such as fans. So when you have this case, say you got a desktop computer or even a laptop computer, this power has to go to these fans so the fans can operate, and the power supply supplies that. One of the interesting things about it is, if you ever do get a desktop computer and you want to have some fun with it, you actually can buy a power supply similar to this that has neon in it. So you don't have to have a boring old power supply from the back in the days. You can have some with some good color on it. Another thing that's kind of interesting, if you're going to put a desktop computer in an area, say your living room or somewhere where you would like to not have to have too much noise, you can buy power supplies that have fans that have certain settings on it and certain features of it that suppresses noise. So there's a lot of little ins and outs you can do if you actually end up having to build your own computer. All right, expansion cards. Expansion cards basically are used to enhance and add features to your computer. So for the example I've got here is your video card. So your video card is typically built into your motherboard. So there's another thing that comes off your motherboard, your video card, or it's your video. So, but the video on a motherboard typically isn't that good. It's good enough for email, it's good enough for basic graphics, it's good enough to go on the internet. But if you want more power, say for instance you're going to game, or you're going to be doing high-end, you're going to do movies, you want to port stuff out from your computer and watch it on TV, a lot of times you want to buy a separate video card. So the video card actually plugs into your motherboard. So, and this will be, the video card here example I've got here is for a desktop computer. So you can plug that into your motherboard, and you plug your cables into that, and actually be able to, like I said, port that information out to a TV or to a monitor. Other examples would be you can do sound cards if you want to. And you could also do your networking through a card like this if you wanted to have, say, fiber optics go into your desktop. So there's a lot of different type of expansion cards you can buy that can give your computer more features. Right. And then input and output devices. These are devices that are used to transfer data to and from a computer. So example of input devices that I've listed here are keyboards, your mouse, webcams, which I'm using currently, as you can see me over in the right hand or the side of the screen here. Microphones, I'm using one of them right now so you can hear the lecture. Scanners and joysticks. There's also other input devices that you could use as well. These are just the most commonly used ones. Output devices would include monitors, printers, and speakers. And it's not limited to those three, but those are probably the three most popular that you would use. And I put a picture down here of an input device of a mouse, and as you can see, it's got a little neon on it, some fancy graphics and things like that. So if you're used to the standard, just basically white or black mouse, you actually can go out and look for things that are fun, that are entertaining, that kind of makes your computing a little bit more interesting, especially if you end up building a desktop computer. There's all kinds of neon fans you can buy now, tubes and stuff like that. And like I'd shown you earlier, you can actually water cool your desktop computers now. So you can actually have a lot of fun with them. And then in summary, again, these are the basic parts. These aren't the only hardware items, but these are your most basic. If you wanted to build a computer, or you're just looking at what the computer has, these are the things they have to have. You have to have a motherboard, a central processing unit, you have to have RAM, hard drive, you need a DVD drive, you also need a way to power all this. Expansion cards, again, those are optional, but those are something that you might end up needing. And you need certain input and output devices. As well as if you're going to build your own computer, you actually can buy a hardware case if you'd like to do that as well. So if you get a chance, check out the crucial website I mentioned earlier to check your RAM, to see how much RAM you have and how much RAM you can add. And I also wanted to add a note, if you ever want to look up some of these parts, you can go to a site called Newegg.com that has some fantastic information about computers and parts and computer prices. Have a nice day. If you have any questions or comments or just want to discuss something about computer hardware, please feel free to give me a call or send me an email. Thank you.